Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Lessons from a Lifelong Educator with Thomas Ammazzalorso. I'm very proud of myself for saying that correctly.
Good job.
My name's Tom. Okay. My name is Michelle Camardella, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Alumni Relations at PACE. I just want to share a few housekeeping notes with you. We have muted people upon entry just so that we don't have any disruptions during the presentation. We are recording the session, as you now know. And also, if you have questions, feel free to enter them in the chat, and we're going to address the questions at the end of the session. Okay. It's my pleasure to introduce our host, Dr. Leslie Sudak. Dr. Sudak is a professor of education at Pace's School of Education. She's committed to promoting the full inclusion of students with disabilities through her teaching, research, and advocacy. Her research has explored strategies to promote the integration of students with disabilities into general education classes, parent-professional partnerships, equity in school discipline, and the role of educational policy in maintaining segregated schooling. She provides professional development to school districts throughout the New York metropolitan area in the areas of inclusive education, collaboration, and co-teaching. So please welcome Dr. Leslie Sudak.
Oh, good evening. Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with this evening's guest, Thomas Ammazzalorso. Thomas received his master's degree in secondary education and teaching from Pace's School of Education. He also earned an MA in International Commerce and Policy and an MED in Educational Leadership and Administration at George Mason University. Thomas is an international baccalaureate teacher of history of the Americas and an advanced placement teacher of microeconomics in Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. He began his career in the Bronx and has spent more than 20 years as an urban educator and administrator in Virginia, Washington, D.C., and New Jersey. He has served as an administrator, supervisor, and multi-certified secondary education teacher for grades 9 through 12. He was recently named the 2020 Outstanding Educator by the University of Chicago. Congratulations, Thomas. I now turn to Thomas so that we can get the story behind his success as a teacher. Thomas, let's start off. If you can describe a bit about where you teach now, your district, your school, your class, and give us the context.
Sure. So I teach for Prince George's County Schools in Prince George's County, Maryland. What that means is once you exit the northeast of the country, once you exit, if you ever exit outside of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and the rest of New England, all the school systems are county-based. They're not district-based, like they're county. There's one superintendent for the county, as Dr. Sudak knows. And so Prince George's County Public Schools, behind my school is Pennsylvania Avenue. And so if you were to stand on the school building and throw a stone, you'd hit DC. And so the biggest challenge I've ever had outside the Bronx, and I compare this school a lot to those first 2 years of teaching in the Bronx, is because what's happened is the reality of gentrification has set it in DC. And so as they gentrify it deeper and deeper and make it so no one can afford it, you're pushing the poor essentially over the line from DC into Prince George's County. The first high school that's there is the one I'm at. So we have 2,000 kids. It is an extremely tough school to teach at. We do have a high turnover of teachers and we have a high turnover of administrators, but it is probably has been over the last 7 years the most rewarding experience of my entire life. And that is simply because it is a place when I go in every day, I have to use every single skill set that I've got. Every single one, every day.
Well, obviously you do so successfully. Congratulations on the University of Chicago Educator Award for 2020. How did that come about?
That's a tough one. And I'm not saying this because like, hey, I got it. I was actually shocked that I got it. So the University of Chicago, when they take in their freshman class, as you know, University of Chicago is very picky, very choosy about taking in their freshman class. It's not easy to get in. And so they take in a freshman class and they said to their freshmen, you're here because, are you here because a teacher inspired you? And so they, across the freshman class, they asked, give us a teacher's name. And then that particular freshman has to put forward the name and do the write-up. And when she did a write-up, I actually, my eyes actually welled up a little bit in tears because this was a student who stuck with me for 2 years through the IB History of the Americas program and needled me just every day for 2 years because she enjoyed it. And then what was going on behind the scenes that I didn't know was the University of Chicago was going to my principal and asking, we want the data on this guy. How's he doing with test scores? And how are his, what are the results and what is, and so there was all this discussion going on behind me that I didn't know about, which was pretty awesome. And so when my was it my principal or I can't remember if it was my principal who called me first or my assistant superintendent who called me first. I think it was the assistant superintendent. So he and I have a pretty good relationship. And he was like, "Hey, congratulations." And I was like, "On what?" I was, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "University of Chicago just named you the 2020 outstanding educator." And I was like, "Huh?" And then they started filling me in on the story. So it is a tough one to get because a lot of it is just luck. And it was just some dumb luck. But it's also because that whole philosophy, and Dr. Sudak will know this, ladies and gentlemen, please, so many of you are aspiring teachers, please never, ever buy into this whole notion that minority students on the standardized testing can't get the scores that are necessary. And I'm sure Dr. Sudak has plenty of research that shows that whole mindset is just complete nonsense. And any kid you teach at any time can get any score you want them to on any standardized tests if you're willing to get them there.
And if they have a teacher who's capable of teaching them. And certainly that brings me to my next question, because I think having the student be the one to nominate you for this award really talks to your emphasis on mentoring young students. Could you talk a little bit about what mentoring means to you and give us an example of what it might look like?
So I'm in a very, one of our old assistant principals used to say, she and I used to talk about, this is without a doubt the most emotionally challenging school that I've ever worked in. And we talk about so many of our students, when they walk in the morning, you can see it on their face. You can see it clear as day on their face. It's actually better for them to be in our building than it is to be in the home environment they walked out of that morning. And so, you accept the fact that you may be the only adult in their lives that is the role model. You may be it. This isn't something I asked for. I didn't ask to be, one of the few role models in their lives, but it's the reality of it. And so I talk to them. Now, granted, I have high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And so, and so it is easier to get their hopes and dreams out of them and what they want to accomplish and how they want to accomplish it. And one of my big things is, and it has been for years and years, especially once I really honed in and developed how to do it, was, what are you doing after high school? What is the plan of action? What is that sheet of paper going to say? And they look at you like, I'll do it like towards the end of 10th grade, beginning of 11th, and the eyes get big. And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, then we're going to sit down and we're going to figure out how to get you across the stage and how to get you that letter in your hand of where you're going next. And I do it every day, the entire school year, because it brings up so many different issues and what you want to do and how you want to do it. And and you mentor every step of the way. And I do other things too. I mean, I get kids that say, Mr. A, I want to go take my learner's permit test. I'm like, well, let's come on in one day after school. Let's run you through the questions. Hey, Mr. A, I really want to have a career in the Navy, but nobody's helping me with the ASVAB. Come on in after school one day, or come on in at lunchtime. A lot of our kids come in at lunchtime because after school, it's dangerous for them to walk home alone after school, where I am. That's just
I hear you saying two very important things. And one is that you have high expectations for the students and you hold them to have their own high expectations and you help them meet those. And that's really, I think, what it's all about. You also mentioned that when they walk in, you see their faces. So let me just ask you about teaching now. As we're in the pandemic situation, how has your teaching changed in this current year?
I'll be completely honest with all of you. It is terrible. This is not the way teenagers are supposed to learn. They've become emotionally, not all. It's kind of like the 1/3 principle. 1/3 will stick with you via Zoom and via Google Classroom, and they'll learn, then there's the other third. If I just cajole them and needle them and I just, they'll kind of love with me. And then there's the other 1/3 that I'm losing. And so the way of them is I go, really, guys, you want to sit with me in online summer school all summer to make up this class? Like haven't you had enough of Mr. A online? Don't you really want to sit in summer school? But it has been tough. I went back and I reread. And by the way, I do not get any, there's nothing for me for promoting this. This is just like, you guys can see the title.
A chicken.
It is a great little book, right? It is a great little book because a lot of times, and I see this with new teachers, I hired a new teacher and he went in day one. And of course he taught as if he was teaching college freshmen because that's what we're so used to, you know, and I'm like, this is high school and these are teenagers and teenagers can be, you know, what's the very nature of teenagers? They can be rebellion, they can be erratic, they can be emotional. They're teenagers. That's what makes them teenagers. And so I'll check out Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul. And I've relied on that book a little bit more this year, just because, you know, I had a long conversation with one of my seniors who I said to him, you know, parents came from Salvador, right? So they're not exactly familiar with what he should be doing after high school. And so he stayed after class, after online class, a couple of days, last week. And he was like, Mr. A, I don't know what to do. And he's like, I don't know what to do after graduation. I was like, well, young man, now you're stuck with me for an hour. So let's plan this out. Let's do this. Let's plan it out and let's figure out what you're going to do. So it's, you know, this pandemic has been just, you know, like the only thing I could tell you is as a social studies teacher, guys, and you know, any of the teachers could have done this. I did. You know, we call it the teachable moment. You know, when this thing hit, I was like, guys, I got to stop the lessons for a second. We got to look at teenagers in 1918, 1919, what happened in the schools. And I went right back and did a little lesson on that. And my students were like, oh. And then they're like, what do you mean this is going to happen again? I go, it's going to happen again at some point. I mean, that's what these things do. And they're like, how do you know? And I was like, your teacher's a historian. So, you know, that's what, but it's just, you know, this isn't the life for teenagers. Teenagers supposed to have homecoming and prom and yearbooks and everything that comes into a high school culture and life. And fundraisers, you know, and it's all been shut down.
So what do you do? I would love to know, because you're an experienced, successful teacher. How do you connect with, how do you deal with the social, emotional needs of your kids now?
I do a lot of, when I look at my curriculum and I look at my lessons, I say to myself, okay, where do we embed life lessons in this? Where do I embed life lessons that deal with how to emotionally handle this? How are you going to handle yourself? How are you going to navigate through this crisis going on? Because you don't, you know, I can't have you shut down.
Mhm.
I can't have you shut down and start failing all your classes. And, you know, the ones that come to me be like, hey, I'm failing all my classes. And that becomes all right, so what time's the lunch break? Let's get together on Zoom. What are you available just even at the end of the day for 20 minutes? And so begin setting goals for them. And I've done a lot of goal setting this year for a lot of teenagers, a lot of goal setting, just to keep them engaged. And for a lot of my juniors and seniors also, I do help them a lot with getting part-time jobs. And that I think has helped them, you know, maintain a certain level of sanity. And I was like, you know, school ends at 2:45 during the pandemic. So why don't you go work somewhere like 4 to 8? And, you know, where do you want to work, and helping them navigate the world of part-time work as a teenager and online applications and interviews. And we do all that too. Well, I'm also at a school where we have partnerships with nonprofits and community-based partnerships. So it's also, I make a lot of, I don't want to say referrals, but a lot of contact information, like, you know, do you know about they're doing this? And do you know about they're doing that? Because I don't want anything in a bubble. You know, they've got to, I want them to have access to as much as they possibly can, because I'm in this profession for their success. I'm not in this profession to fail kids. Guys, I want you to know something. As aspiring teachers, I've talked some teachers out of teaching. As a department chair, I've talked them out because at some point, they were no longer in this for student success. They were in this to get a paycheck and be bitter. We don't need people in this because they have summers off. We need people in this because they like working with whatever age group it is, and they want to get in there and they want to teach, and they're 100% passionate about their content area, and they can make it fun and exciting and be that teacher that the kids are like, oh, I can't wait to go to this class because it's, you know, what I say, use of drama. Because they're
I love the cheerleading approach and I love the passion. Let me turn that around a little bit and ask you, what drives and sustains you? How do you keep it going?
The gym every day for 90 minutes, which I just came from. I actually, and I try to encourage more and more teachers to do this, whether it's social studies, science, English, math, foreign language, career and technical ed, business ed, marketing ed, whatever it is. Do yourself a favor when you're a teacher. And even if it means taking a day, even though you're going to have opportunities to do professional development, take a day, even if you have to use sick leave or personal leave, take a day and go to a think tank or go to a symposium or go to something in your content area, right? Go to something in it, right? Because these things, especially like the New York City metropolitan area and the Washington, D.C. metropolitan areas, those are the two areas I'm most familiar with, right? And so I don't know what like the Miami metropolitan area offers. I'm sure they do offer some, but whatever it is, go to a symposium or a presentation that falls within your content area. I went to a presentation a couple of years ago. There were two professors. I want to say it was American University, and they were just putting on, and it was open to the public. And I told my principal, I said, you know what? I said, you're not going to give me leave for this, which is cool. No problem. I'm going to take a sick day. I have to go to this. And there was two professors from American University from the School of probably International Studies who were like, is there going to be a war with China somewhere around 2040? And I was like, I have to go to this because one, I teach history of the Americas and I teach how America interacts with the world. And two, I love social studies. I need to hear this from people who are a lot more, I'm not published, who are very published and researched. And I went to it and I brought it back into my lessons. It made my lessons more interesting. So as much as we do PD, and obviously the big thing is, educational technology. And I consistently need professional development in educational technology just because I do. I love it. It blinks and it's shiny and I love it. And I had a groundbreaking professor in the Pace University Graduate School of Education almost 25 years ago. Oh my God, it was so long ago. I had a groundbreaking professor who was light years ahead of her time. And I mean,
you can name her.
I say it again.
Feel free to name her.
Oh, her name was Dr. Flank. What was her first name?
Sandra.
Dr. Sandra Flank was decades. I mean, we had this small group and we would sit in like her educational technology class and she'd come in and she'd tell us, well, one day students are going to be able to there'll be a website for everything will have a website and students will be able to take the entire course online. And we'd sit there and we'd be like, so wherever she went to dinner, she must have had the really good wine because she's coming in here. They're like, there's no way this is going to happen. This is a pipe dream, taking an entire class online. Like that's not even that's not even rooted in reality, light years. And let me just tell you this too, because this is the power of PACE. How else do you stay motivated? I got lucky. I went through a teacher preparedness program that put me light years ahead. I mean, I was having professional development year 5 as a teacher. And they're like, oh, we're going to do this. And I'm like, I learned this in an entire course at PACE 5 years ago. And you guys are just getting to this now? And I remember having to sit through professional development. They're like, what's the matter? I'm like, PACE had me doing this 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And we're just doing this now. So you guys are in, and I'm sure it's only gotten stronger, it's cutting edge. And so you just, if you love what you do, and I love what I do. Like I was born for this job. I was born for this job. Not many of us out here are aspiring 50-year teachers. I finally figured it out. June 30th, 2052 is my retirement date. That'll put me at the 50-year mark. And so that's the goal. So, that in the gym for 90 minutes a day, 5-6 days a week is how you stay motivated.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that very much. So I'm going to return a little bit to the teaching during the pandemic and just ask you the question. Do you think there's like anything that we've learned from this experience of the last year?
That's a great question. We've learned a lot as far as what works and what doesn't work with teaching online. But I think we've learned a lot of what doesn't work. And I think we've learned that there are more, the possibilities are as vast and diverse as the students themselves, right? Without a doubt, the possibilities are as vast and diverse as students themselves. I think a lot of it is technical abilities, like, getting teachers trained into Google Classroom, WebEx, Zoom, Canvas. I don't know if PACE is a Canvas campus. Is my school system. We're embracing Canvas now, so I'm one of the first teachers that is getting trained on it. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. But then you get into, this is, and I really don't need this to continue. Like I want back in my classroom. I want the kids back. I thrive on teenage insanity. And I think you asked me, you know, I thrive on teenage insanity, and I need their energy in the room powering me, because that's what does it. Plus, I have all these iPhone questions, and I don't know how to use my iPhone, and I need to be around teenagers because otherwise I don't know half the functions on my iPhone. But, you know, how has it changed? I wish there was more time built in for me to schedule during the day. I don't know how you would do it with one-on-one Zooms or three-on-one Zooms, because that's the thing I've learned that they really need. They just need a teacher for 10 minutes with that constant reinforcement and that constant connection, and that, you know, it is a social emotional connection to them, so that they're not feeling displaced, and they're not experiencing this, well, you know, it doesn't really matter, nobody cares, it's just, you know, it's,
And I can feel that you're such an interpersonal. I mean, you need the interpersonal to
I do.
keep it going,
I need
and as
them
well
to
as
keep going. I need them to keep me going, which the only thing that's survived on is I'm the teacher that I just, when I put 4 years of work into you, 3 or 4 years of work in you as a teenager, when you graduate and you're going off to college, that doesn't mean I'm done with you, right? I'm not done with you. So when they graduate, I'm like, this is my email, this is my cell phone number. So for the first 2 years, when you're doing liberal arts, Mr. A's had all those classes. Now, granted, Mr. A is old and over that, because my sophomores especially just look at me and they go, "Oh my God, you were born in the '70s. You're so old," and and they do it like all the time. They're like, "Oh my God, are you old? You're like almost 50," and and uh, and so I'm vested in them, and so I do get the phone calls like, "Hey, this professor has me doing this. Should I do it this way?" And so some of them really take advantage of that, because it's like the Mr. A guarantee. So it's like free tutoring for a year or two, but it's just supposed to be like every once in a while, proof of paper. But some of them really, and I tell them this during their high school career. And so they're like, "Oh no, I got to make sure I get your number before I leave." And so I do a lot of that as well, which is young people in general. Um, and you know, I don't know if I saw one for a few minutes. You know, I was a devout fraternity guy as an undergrad in college. And so we have a chapter at Pace, and I went to Ramapo College over in North Jersey. And so anytime our undergrads call me for something, you know, I'll mentor them as well, or I help them with a research paper as well, because I'm vested just as much in college kids as I am in high school kids. The difference is that high school kids really need to hear the message of, you're going across the graduation stage, or I'm going to drag you across the graduation stage. So you get to choose which one you want. You walk, or I drag you by your teenage ankle across the graduation stage.
I hear you saying that mentoring is really a lifelong process. It doesn't end when they walk out of your classroom.
Yeah, well, it's also, I mean, we're all lifelong learners, right? I mean, I'm a lifelong learner, and you know, people tell me all the time, "Oh, 20 years, you got this." No, I don't. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? I'm a 20-year teacher. I wasn't ready for this pandemic. I was not ready to teach on Google Classroom. The first quarter, I was all over the place trying to figure out what would work best. And it was terrible. And the kids admitted it too. They were like, "This is awful." I'm like, "I know." So, you know, let me figure this out, guys. You know, let's hang together. We're going to hang together through this. That was always my thing. We're going to hang together. We're going to hang together. And so, because I wanted them to see that I was human.
Right. And they're not alone, because you're clearly with them, which is really what I'm hearing.
DJ.
So let me go back to the beginning. Let me go back to the beginning of your career.
Mm-hmm.
What made you come into teaching?
Huh. You know, that's a great question. There's probably, I'll call him a kid. And I grew up in a very Italian family. I'm the grandson of immigrants. And when I did my student teaching in Peekskill High School in Peekskill, New York, right? I mean, I was really young. What was I? Probably 22. I mean, is that around, what are you around when you do your student teaching, when you're at Pace and you went from undergrad to the master's program at Pace, what are you around, 22, 23 when you student teach?
Exactly.
I was around 22, 23. And right before I student taught, I had been doing a lot of, I graduated college, right? Trying to find a job at first. So I started substitute teaching, and it was fun. And there's this kid, and had the same first name as mine, which is why I remember it. And he basically made me a teacher. I was subbing, and it was in the social sciences. And so we were going back and forth over, he's like, "You're just a sub." I'm like, "Well, take advantage of my brain while I'm here." And he made it so much fun. I was like, "I think I'm going to make a career out of this." And Pace was like physically right there, Pace Pleasantville. Even though back then we had some classes at White Plains. And the honest truth is I graduated from Pace. I got my job in the Bronx, and I love teaching for New York City public schools. And there's a slight chance, there's a very slight chance that I might be teaching for New York City public schools come September. I loved it. But at the same time, I want to go to grad school, and I, political science junkie and a history junkie. And this town, DC, really is, and then, you run into, I run into Kirsten Gillibrand from time to time, or I see Chuck, I see Chuck Schumer from time to time. And, I'm like, I'm not a New York voter anymore, but it is, I think I'm actually more enthusiastic now than I was 15, 20 years ago. I really do. Cause I walk in, I'm like, yes, we're here. Let's get started. And so it's just,
the teachers are burning out and you're just exploding. It's really,
I literally, I want you guys to know something. I go in every day to work and I'm like excited. And that's why this pandemic hurt me. This pandemic, it did have an impact on me to where I was talking to a real veteran teacher, like a real veteran. Like I have somebody in my department who is at year 45 and he's a machine. He's 74 years old and he's a machine. And he's actually, I've gone to him a number of times, born and raised in DC, phenomenal man, just phenomenal. And I've gone to him and I'm like, hey, Mr. S, like I need some, this is not working for me. And he was like, come on, come on. He's like, and he'd be like, he gives me the pep talk I need. I'm like, all right, I'm ready. Let's keep going. Let's go. Let's rock and roll. Let's do this. But again, this is not for teenagers. This is not for it's just been, I just want back. Yeah, we're back. I mean, my school system is back. I know some of the school systems in Westchester, have been back. We're back hybrid. So the kids had the option, but unfortunately here in what we call the DMV, which when I first moved here, I was like, DMV means Department of Motor Vehicles. It does in the Northeast. Here in the Mid-Atlantic, it means DC, Maryland, Virginia. So here in the DMV, the rates keep going up. So the COVID rates keep going up and the pandemic keeps getting prolonged. And so kids have an option of continuing to learn from home. But some of mine have said to me, hey, I just have to meet you, so I'm coming. I want to meet with you. And I'm like, just don't breathe near me, because teenage germs are laced with hormones and they're more powerful. And I'm old, as you described me as old. And, you told me I have one foot in the grave already. So, it's just don't breathe too close.
A teenager's perspective, right?
Yeah, I'll never, I probably told you this before. As one day my driver's license was on the table in my office. As a department chair, I have an office, and I had it out on, I don't know why, and they came and a bunch of them looked down at it, and they were stunned. They were just stunned that I was born in the 70s. They just, it blew their mind. They're like, you were born in the 70s. And I was like, yeah. They're like, you didn't even have the internet. Did you even have video games? Like, yeah, we had Pong. It's like, but it is really rough on them.
So let me ask you two questions. One, to focus a little bit for the people who here are teacher educators and some people who are going to be teachers. The first question is, go back to the PACE teacher education program. Mm-hmm. Think about, what about the teacher education program prepared you for teaching? And what was missing that when you first went in, you wish you had known?
Well, I don't know if I can say there was much missing. When I look back now, and it probably is there now, but then again, it was also 95, 96, 97. So educational technology just wasn't there the way it is now. Looking back, whatever there was, I wish they'd let Dr. Flank really just boom.
We can bring her back. It's okay.
I mean, just, she just, I continue to look back to this day and I'm like, I don't understand. She must have had a crystal ball. She must have had a crystal ball because she was predicting stuff that everybody said. What prepared me was coming in and really sitting down with all these different professors. And they were like, here's what teaching is. You need to understand educational psychology. You need to understand like the challenges of special ed kids that are going to be in your class. You need to understand ESOL learners. You need to, and it was like exposure to every single thing and a case study approach. What are you going to do in this situation? What are you going to do? Because the honest truth, ladies and gentlemen, is that a lot of times you're not, a lot of the kids will travel with you. They'll travel with you on this journey you're going to take them through your class. What are you going to do about the kids on the edges? What are you going to do? I mean, yeah, they mainstream special ed kids into my class. And I'm doing something right, because in my school, the kids who have the 504s and the IEPs, when they come through my class, and I'm really not sure exactly, I have the highest passing rate of students who have the 504s and IEPs on the state-based exams in Maryland, right? I had it in DC as well. So, you know, but how do you want to do this? Who do you want to be in that classroom, right? Who do you want to be? What is your measure of being effective? You know, for me, a lot of times it's the data, but you know, it's not an easy job. I tell people it's not meant for everybody. This job is not meant for everybody. Pace also taught me that as well. Like, I'm sitting there going through a lot of the classes and I'm like, yeah, this job isn't for everybody. Not even close. But the other thing, you know, we were talking about before, Pace was so cutting edge from the understanding by design framework, which I still back, you know, and I'm sure it's still covered at Pace. I'm sure it's still covered in the program. There's other frameworks out there. I'm not anti any framework at all. I just have found that for me, and as I train teachers, what I learned at Pace, which kind of frightens me, because I work with teachers, you know, they come out of other teaching programs, and I'm not going to downplay any of the colleges in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, but I'm like, well, what about UBD? And they look at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, weren't you exposed to several frameworks in teaching? And then you start to realize, like, no, I had a very forward-thinking, progressive, you know, master's program in teaching that was like, if you're going to teach, you're going to teach, and they're going to learn. And so when you started talking about what it means to be a teacher, right? That's what we got into at Pace. I don't know how vastly different the courses are now, or how much I don't know. I haven't gone through the it's still called the MST program, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, but I mean, it was like, there were things that we would talk about, like, you know, kids with, you know, special needs, or, you know, emotional challenges that, you know, when I thought about teaching, just never would have entered my mind about, what are you going to do with this student in the classroom? You know, what are you going to do with that student in the classroom? And Pace we were just, you know, look, you ready? This is my other surprise. I grabbed my green binder. I have a green binder that, if my apartment got on fire, I'd be going for the green binder. It's got everything in it: test, praxis results, all my licenses from each state I'm licensed in. It also has this. Now, I don't know how well you can see it. These are not photocopies. These were when Pace was like, you're going to sit and you're going to develop a lesson plan template. Here's lesson plan. These are the physical, actual templates. These are not photocopies. These are the original sheets that I got from the Pace University Master of Science in Teaching program. Here they are. And, you know, I say this all the time. Maddie Hunter, you can never go wrong with Maddie Hunter, ever. Ever. You can't go wrong with her. You can't. Just like you can, and my colleagues make fun of me. They're like, you really keep blooms on the wall? And I do. I have blooms. I do. I have it on the wall in one of the classrooms I teach in, because I still reflect on it. Pace, all of this came out of Pace. Like, you've got to, how are you going to move them? This was all the power of Pace, every last bit of it. And I've worked with other teachers, came out of other programs. None of this, like, what did you learn? Like, there's an art and a science to teaching. And I guess I made the right choice. I just, you know, there were a lot of choices out there. I guess luck of the draw.
We certainly love hearing this, and we hope that whatever changes we've made in the program have improved it, and we've maintained that core sense of values and practices. I will tell you that most of our programs now, we continue to want to be inclusive of all kids, and we've made most of our programs multiple certifications, because as long as you're going to do that, have the certification to do it as well. So I hope we've extended your thinking.
Yeah, that's what you put my thinking light years ahead. That's when I talk, you know, I say it all, the power of Pace in the, you know, getting the Master of Science in Teachers. It was light years ahead. Even back then, where teachers now look at me, go, really? Pace back then was like, hey, listen, whatever content you're in, keep in the back of your mind that, you know, if you're social studies, go ahead and get duly certified in special ed, or get duly certified in ESL.
Exactly.
I think Pace may have been the only school talking about that 25 years ago. I'm duly certified in ESL. I also picked up my CTE licenses, but that was just luck of the draw because of the economics classes I had back then. So I can do social studies ESL, but because that was put in my head a long time ago, and I went and got it. And let me tell you something: if whatever social studies, science, English, and math, I'm kind of biased because as a historian, ESL became a very, my biggest problem when I have ESL learners or ESOL learners in class, or ELL learners, depending on where you're living in the country, ESOL, ESL, ELL. When I have English language learners in my classroom, I got to be careful, because when they start telling me where they're from, I want to get into a long historical discussion about when they came here, what was going on. And I had a student from Syria, and I was like, just last summer for summer school, and we were doing in an intermediate ESL class. I put away my social studies license every summer, and I take out the ESL one to improve my skill sets, and just develop something different over the summer. Oh yeah, I do that too. I torture myself all the time, all right? All the time, just forcing myself to develop new skill sets. And so I just put away the social studies license, and I take out the ESL license or the ELL license for summer school. The problem was I kept delving into, she was in the middle of the war, in the middle of the Civil War. And so now I'm sitting here like, here's the historian coming out going, oh, what was this and what was that and who's in it? And, I'm like, no, you can't do this. You have curriculum to cover. Like, you've got to get through, like, these students meet certain benchmarks and standards. And you can't spend an hour talking to the students on the history of Syria and what's being told in the American media versus what she can tell, the reality of what she can tell you. So,
but what a wonderful way to invite that student into your class and into the American educational system, is that we care about where you come from and we're going to listen to you.
I wanted to know.
Absolutely.
And that's part of which is the student who nominated me for the University of Chicago Outstanding Educator Award for 2020 was, she has been in the United States, I want to say, since middle school, but she's originally from Nigeria. And so I used to say, when I'm teaching history of the Americas, I'd be like, so for example, you want to fill it in? And she would. I gave her, and she'd be like, oh, she's somebody who I turned into a junkie for political science. And so she took a renewed interest in the politics, government, history of the country she was born in.
Excellent.
And so it was just awesome, because she'd be like, well, this faction and this faction. And I was getting school. I was like, wow, really? I didn't know, and I don't know about every country. People think social studies teachers automatically know about all 197 countries on the planet. No.
And it's okay not to know.
I don't know them all. So when I meet people from there who just told me recently they're from Trinidad and Tobago, and they told me there was a bunch of Italians down there, and I was like, no. And I was like, really? And so, it's one of my things, my background. I do study the Italian American experience, where my people are in America, where they ended up. And
hopefully your students get that same pride in their own origins.
Yeah, and that's what I tell them. I'm like, guys, we have to know your own history as well.
So let me ask you one question. What advice do you have for someone thinking about entering the profession?
This is a really interesting, a fraternity brother of mine who's my age, his son's now down here going to University of Maryland, College Park, and he teaches for New York City public schools. And he and I were having a Facebook discussion. He tried to talk his son out of becoming a high school teacher. And he was like, don't do this. Meanwhile, I'm on Facebook like, do it. It's awesome. It's amazing. I was like, your dad just got bitter. Coming into this profession, right? Because I'm always on the lookout for new teachers. Coming into this profession, there were a lot of things I wish I had known. I didn't realize I'd need to be a lot more politically savvy because of the groups that I had to deal with. I mean, parents have this expectation of the teachers. Administrators have this expectation of the teachers. The kids have this expectation of the teachers. My teachers in my department have a certain expectation of their department chair. And so obviously I didn't start as a department, as a department chair, but department chair is that wonderful position of middle management where everybody comes to you and you just sit there and, you're like, when you come into this profession, if you do right by your students, everything else will fall into place. If you do right by them, if they know that you're vested in their learning, if they know you are not out to fail them, right? I tell them, I'm like, look, I tell them on day one, I want to make you a social studies nerd. I said, you're probably never going to be as much of a nerd as I am in social studies, but it'd be really cool if I could make you into a social studies nerd. But coming into this profession, you know, don't, there are going to be days where the administration is saying one thing, and, you know, the parents, we got too many parents that are like, oh, everything's the teacher's fault. And American civilization and society, it's all become our fault. I say that all the time. I turn on the media, whatever it is. And, you know, it's one thing we talk about the three major cable news networks and how they're opposite of each other, yet somehow all three of them manage to blame, oh, it's the teacher's fault. I always say that, like, it's always interesting. The three big ones are always like, oh, it's the teacher's fault. If you do right by the kid, if you do right by the teenagers, right, you will forever be okay. And
I agree. That's where the emphasis needs to be.
Yeah, you just got to focus on their learning. Just focus. I solely focus on them. By the way, there's tricks to the trade. There's total tricks to the trade. I do watch teenage culture. I do try to figure out what's the hottest song, what's the hottest food, what's the hottest fashion. And I do try to stick it in a lesson. What's the hottest teenage speak and slang? And I purposely will put it into my lesson and use it incorrectly. Right? I'll purposely use it incorrectly. And they'll look at me like, oh my God, he's so old. He has no idea how to use that expression. I'm like, what? I didn't use that right. They're like, no, Mr. A, like, just no, you're old now. And, you know, your bones are probably brittle and you probably can't meant to do this. And I'm just like, you guys are cruel. You're beating up on me for it. But, you just have to, you know, I've had discussions, they come in, I'm like, why, what is everybody wearing? What is it? And they're like, oh, we're all wearing this. I'm like, really? And like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, if you're all wearing this from a certain company, I want to see if I can buy stock in it. And they're like, what? And so I take an interest in teenage culture. And by the way, I encourage humanities teachers to do this all the time. Science teachers, I mean, anybody could do it. You know, I throw in like teenagers of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the zeros, the 10s, and now the 20s, which, by the way, I have to admit, one of the other reasons, Dr. Sudak, that has allowed me to do this, I am currently at a point in my teaching career where I am teaching the children of 80s and 90s kids. So that in and of itself has renewed my passion, because I'm sitting there like, oh my God, all your parents are within like 3 to 4 years of my age. And so I'll put on like a hit song from like 1989 and I'll show them the music video and they'll go home and they'll do something and their parents will come into parent teacher conferences and be like, what are you teaching these kids? Why do they know Tone Loc and Funky Cold Medina? And, you know, they're just, the parents, I'm like, and the other thing I'll do is I do it all the time. And Dr. Sudak will really know about this. When you teach American history, there are 4 TV shows, 4 famous American TV shows: All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Maude, and oh my God, and which one? Good Times.
I don't want to age myself.
Yeah, Good Times. The 4 shows that are all connected. The 4 shows are all connected. And I'll use it.
Girls.
Well, that's like recent for someone who's old. Like, that's like recent. No, Good Times, because the four shows from Norman Lear that are all interconnected. And I'll use a clip, and I'll use like some outrageous clip in a U.S. history class that I'm teaching the 70s, and I'll show a clip from Archie Bunker and George Jefferson, and the kids go, "This was on television?" And I go, "Okay, new assignment, interview. I don't care if it's your grandparents or if it's one of their brothers or sisters, just 10-minute interview. Call them up, 10-minute interview." And kids will come back in and be like, I was on the phone for an hour with my grandmother. And she was telling me all about this, and this. And I just sit back, I'm like, tell me about it. And they give me a whole, so I turn that into a, you know, discussion across the generations, wherever I can use that, wherever I can put life in. So they see themselves, they understand we're all human. We're all just human. And we're all trying to get through. And that's what I do.
Thomas, not your words, your actions, your experiences are so complete. They really tell the story of a passionate, bright, educated, enthusiastic teacher who cares about his kids. And
Yeah.
that's really what I'm hearing is the message it comes back to, is really meeting them where they're at and bringing them to the knowledge that they might not have. And that's a pretty wonderful skill. I want to leave room for people if they want to ask questions. So I don't want to, I think I've exhausted my, you could go on, I know, because you have stories from all of
I
those years
love,
and the
love.
passion to tell them.
If I can go past the age of 79, I just met one recently. He's like 81 and still teaching high school full time. If I can, I will. But I also don't want to be the teacher we had a couple of years ago that I had to cajole into retirement. I was like, come on, Mr. B, like, 42 years in the same building, in the same department, in the same classroom, might be time to like, how about you teach class at community college one night? It's just like, but yeah, it's when you find your calling, this is more, it's not a job. I don't have a job. I have a hobby that I'm passionate about. That's a calling. And, I look back and say, well, Pace set me up to they launched me like a rocket. And it's just no looking back since then, and it was just funny the first 5 years going to professional development. Like, oh, we got to teach you in this. And I'd be like, we did this at Pace like 4 years ago. I had an entire class on it. And this is, breaking PD. You just got lucky,
Wow. Oh, I could listen forever, as I'm sure everybody can, because there's so much joy behind what you're saying. And if you can love what you do and love the people that you do it with, that's really what it's about. So I just want to ask if there are any questions, and if we can open up, we can do it through chat, or we can do it through just opening up your, taking off your mics.
Yeah, you got, feel free to ask me the good, the bad, the ugly. With teachers that, aspiring teachers, I just hired a first year this year. And so, we talk on the phone probably once a week, so I make sure I'm like, you good? What's going on? What are the issues? What, because that's the other thing I should have mentioned. Don't be discouraged by your first year. That's when you email Dr. Sudak and be like, it's my first year. I had your class and they mainstreamed these 3 kids in. And just because you graduated Pace doesn't mean that you can't email Dr. Sudak. You can be like, this is what happened. What am I doing? And so you get that guarantee from the Pace Graduate School of Ed. Just because you graduate doesn't mean you're still there. You can't still ask them questions. But your first year, guys, it's rough. Your first year is rough. It's just you and a bunch of teenagers in a room. And they're looking at you like, okay, and they want to learn. They legitimately want to learn. I go from teaching IB kids one period, International Baccalaureate kids, or AP kids one period, to remedial classes in the social studies, where my kids are 3 and 4 years behind in their reading and math levels. And I literally like change the hat. Like I'm like, we don't wear hats, but it's literally like my invisible hat. I take one off and go, okay, now where am I going? Okay, I'm going off to period 2. All right, this is my class where I just saw the data. They're all reading at like a 6th grade level. And these are like sophomores in high school. So I can't go in with the same mindset of the IB class or the AP class I just left. Even though in my school, 95% of the kids are reading, their reading and math skills are 2 years below or 3 years below where they should be. This is a rough job. But your first year, don't be discouraged by your first year. It's okay. My first year, I was a hot mess. My first year, trying to figure out, I was like, but Pace told me to, and it was like you can't integrate everything the first year. You can't integrate everything. It's just not going to happen.
Even with all the field experiences, when we take the training
Right.
wheels off, you've got to be able to roll, and you don't roll smoothly.
Right. So don't try to do everything the first year. Don't try to do it all. Don't try to do it all. I tried to do it all my first year, and next thing you know, I'm grading papers at 2 o'clock in the morning because I wanted to give an essay the day before. Grades are due the next day, and it was just like, you can't do it all. But yeah, questions, comments, concerns, issues, noticings, wonderings.
I have a quick question. I'm Elizabeth Robbins. I'm a freshman at Pace in Westchester. I am doing certification for nursery through 5th grade in early childhood education and special ed. And I'm also doing 5th grade through 9th grade certification in English. And I was just wondering, I got this, what's it called? I got like recommended to come to this through one of my teaching teachers. And she recently like asked us the question, like, I share like having the passion of being a teacher. I've always wanted to be a teacher. Um, how do you like start like your first day, like showing your kids that like you're um like having your kids like show you that like you want like for them to succeed and that you want the best for them. Um, so I thought this was a really interesting question because I feel like the first day I'm just going to be all over the place.
You know, one of the things I talk to my new teachers about all the time in my department is my first year in the Bronx. I student taught at Peekskill High School, but I had a cooperating teacher there to bail me out. You know, every time, if there was and I could go, obviously I was still taking classes at pace while, still had 1 or 2 classes, so I could run to a professor to bail me out. So I always talk about, I still do, that first year in the Bronx and how I was, oh my God, because you're like, oh my God, I'm 24 years old and there's all these 15, 16 and 17-year-olds and like, I'm in charge. And so, and I didn't know I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know I wanted to be a teacher until after I graduated college. I actually went to business school first because economics is my first love. I'll share this with you. So when I taught in New York City public schools back then, I don't know if they still do it. They still should. We came in and they sat us down. They're like, look, we're going to give you a formula: 50% teacher, 25% mentor, because they were like teacher, 25% mentor, and 25% actor. And at first I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? So I only, it's not, you only teach half the time. That's not it. You still teach, but you have to let the mentor, you have to blend the actor and the mentor and let them out of you. You have to. So I go in, and by the way, I'm one of the few teachers, the night before the first day of school, I have butterflies. 20 years in, the night before and I'm like nervous. And it was 3-4 summers ago, my first summer school experience. I'm, teaching 20 years or, 17 years. This is my first ESL class I've ever taught, right? And I'm like, literally like, and they're like, hey, why are you nervous? I was like, this is the first time I'm teaching ESL in summer school. So at least it's summer school. So they're like, you've been teaching for 20, for 15, there's 17, 18 years. I'm like, but this is a different skill set of mine. And these kids are coming in. So that first day, the answer is go through your rules and regulations. Motivating them day one is what they need. Go in there and be like, you know what, first quarter, I know some of you want, first quarter A's and B's. And so how are we going to get there? Because if you set the first day on that positive note, like I'm going to get you there. So let's plan and plot a little bit of how we're all going to get to A's and B's. Because unfortunately, and oh, by the way, I forgot to say, elementary education, every time I meet an elementary educator, I do this. Thank you. Thank you. Because I don't know how elementary teachers do it. I don't, no, I just, no. I don't know how they do it. Elementary teachers should all be given like a golden statue in their honor, because I don't know. I mean, you think about what an elementary, oh, you're just supposed to teach them like reading. I mean, it's like, I get to teach them like, stories and, you actually, but yeah, if you set a tone the first day of, we're going for it. This, every year, this year is the year. We're going for A's and B's for everybody for first quarter. And so they know immediately, oh, this guy's not out to fail me. He's not out to fail me. And I know you're like, are teachers up? Yes, that's the signal some teachers send the first day of school. That's the signal some teachers send on day one. And I look at them like, what are you doing? They're teenagers. Weren't you a teenager? Don't you remember? Like prom is like the biggest deal. Why are you, I'm sitting there scratching my head like, okay, well, if I give this kid this extra, so the first day of school, that's the theme in my classroom. And of course, I try to go in the first day of school every year with some wild story and just some what. So they're like, oh my God, like what? And I'll go in with some wild story about something in social studies. And the kids are like, no. I'm like, oh yeah, people are wild. So, but that first set the high expectations on day one and tell them we're going for it first quarter. We're going for A's and B's. And when a kid says, "Oh, I'm going to fail," you're like, "No, you're not. No, you're not. We'll do it 5 times if we have to, but you're not going to fail." You know? And so, because that's what you just, I'll be honest with you all. You couldn't pay me enough money to be a teenager now. Today, in today's society, no way. No way. I'd go to college again. I'd be an undergrad again, but there's no way. Forget it. Forget it.
It's almost 7 o'clock, so I don't want to keep people past their dinner hour, although we could listen, I am sure, for the rest of the evening. It's inspiring to hear. And I think what you're saying is the lived experience that we're trying to create. And for those of us in teacher prep, I mean, it really feels very good to know it actually holds with passion. And I just can't thank you enough. Are there any other questions before we end? Because I know it's coming on to 7 o'clock.
I have 2 alma maters, both, I don't know if PACE does it. Does PACE let alumni have a PACE email address?
I don't know.
We used to have a PACE forwarding address, and that vendor went out of business. So if you had one, you can get one. And I think we're just starting to offer it to folks who might want it.
Yeah, so my alma mater over in Bergen County, where I still spend a lot of time, is Ramapo College, and they offer, and I just put my email address there. You can email me anytime. I talk to a lot of aspiring teachers about, they get routed to me as far as optimism. And I'll be straight up honest with you guys. This is the greatest job in the world. I am 20 years in. It is still the greatest job in the world. The pandemic, my students know that the pandemic has crushed me as well. They know it. They know. They're like, "Hey, you don't like this." I'm like, "No, I need to be with you guys in the classroom." I go, and we call it every high school, whatever pick the name of the high school and put the word drama next to it, and Sleepy Hollow High School, Sleepy Hollow Drama. It's just one, it's the one I come up with, or OHS, Ossining High School Drama, where my parents went. Suitland High School, we got the Suitland Drama. I go, "Guys, I need the drama. I need the action. Like Mr. A's been on his couch teaching for a year. I can't do this." And I have like 17 iPhone questions I wrote down. I don't know how to do this. And
Thomas, you alone could help us solve the teacher shortage. I guarantee it. All we need to do is put you on the air in those 3 channels you mentioned. You will dispel that old narrative and create a much newer and much realer, much more authentic narrative.
You got to have the right teacher prep program. You got to have a teacher prep program that's on the cutting edge. And like I said, PACE wasn't the only program when I was getting, and I'll be honest with you, like, I don't even know how, because I was looking at different programs. There was one at Mercy, right? There was a master's in education at Mercy. There's one at PACE. I was looking at a few of them, and I don't even remember what the deciding factor was. So it was luck.
I'm sure it was Sandra Flank. I'm sure it was Sandra. You interviewed Sandra Flank, and she just hooked you. I know it.
I don't even know. It's still so funny. Like, how was she right about so many things in 1996?
We're going to send the transcript to her just so that she can recognize the acknowledgement. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all of us, and ask if there, because it is 7 o'clock and I don't really want to hold people beyond what we had advertised. But we could go on forever. Your enthusiasm, your love of PACE certainly warms our heart. And hopefully, many of our graduates feel this way, and hopefully we'll continue to in the future. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise.
And for those of you, this already, but Dr. Sudak's got some really interesting research. I've been checking out her research, and it's really interesting. So if you guys haven't had a chance to yet, go delve into some of her research, because it's really cool. She's got some really cutting edge stuff there. My email address is there. Feel free to email me. I get teachers, and I get former students who are going to be teachers, which is cool. I got former students who are going to be teachers, and they're like, but nobody yet, none of my former students have asked me to be the cooperating teacher for their student teaching. Like, I haven't gotten that yet. Like, I can't wait for that day. I can't wait for that day. Although someone who did student teach under me in DC, I just hired her for the school we're at now. So it's kind of cool. I was like, ooh, another version of me in the department. But
I'd like to thank both of
I
you
encourage the,
for,
I'm sorry, Michelle.
I was going to say, I'd like to thank both of you for sharing your evening with us and for a great interview, Dr. Sudak, and Thomas, for being such a pro PACE alum. We always love that. The fact that you still put what you learned at PACE into practice, I think, is pretty amazing. We're also going to share this recording there were some classes going on tonight, so students couldn't attend. So we're going to share the recording too. I'll make sure that Desiree gets that. And you might get emails from people that you haven't heard of, because it might be people who see the recording instead.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm just sitting here wondering how many Narcissos that Desiree is related to, because I know a whole bunch of them from Westchester.
From my husband's side.
But yeah, email me. I'm always around. Like I said, you chose the right program. You chose the right program to go through for a teacher prep. It is awesome. And I realize, I know they're probably, PACE professors are famous, check this out, read this. I know they're probably still doing that. But it's legit. It's legit. You will see that when you go into teaching 3 and 4 and 5 years later, you're going to be like, well, I did this at PACE like 3 years ago. How is this cutting edge?
Thank you.
We'll see.
Thank you for the accolades, and I hope you realize we give them right back to you, because certainly we did not create your enthusiasm and your success, but we are part of it, and we're pleased to be so. Thank you all for coming
Thank you so
tonight.
much.
Guys, pleasure meeting all of you.
Great. Take care. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Good luck in your programs. All right.
Thank you.
Teach.